Folks in Appalachia didn't paint their porches blue as a fashion statement. They didn't do it because it looked pretty or because it was a trend. They did it as protection. They did it to keep things out of their house. And whether you believe it to be true or not, many homes in Appalachia and all across the South, even today, have blue porches. This isn't just any color of blue. This is Haint blue. Haint. Haint. What is a haint? A haint is an old word in Appalachia, especially in other locations, but it's another word for a spirit. Back in the olden days, folks in Appalachia believed that a haint was kind of a troublemaker, a spirit that traveled around often in a mist or foggy type presence, and it was only there for one reason, and that was to cause trouble for you and your family. So what is Haint blue? Haint blue is a color that the old timers came up with, and they would often paint the ceiling of their porches, sometimes the flooring, the doors, the windows, around the windows, and sometimes the shutters, Haint blue. So how would a certain color keep out a ghost or a spirit? It was believed in those days, and even today in some parts of the world, that spirits or ghosts cannot cross water. If they come to a stream, a creek, or a river, they have to stop. So folks in those days thought if they painted their porch blue, it would confuse haints, spirits. They would see the blue porch and think it is a body of water, so they would go move on. Or they would think it was the sky, like a sky blue, because Haint blue is kind of a bluish green, a lighter color blue, and they thought it would confuse these haints who were traveling all around looking for their next victim. So they would either think it was the sky, and they would just kind of float on into oblivion, or it was a body of water that they could not cross, so they would move on. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Porches to our homes are most often the entryways into our house. Now we do have back doors and side doors, and there are points of entry, but the front porch is often thought of as the main gateway to our homes. So they knew that. And you may think this was just an old Appalachian folklore. It is in a way, but at the same time, even though a lot of these folks back many, many years ago, they didn't have a lot of education, these people were not dumb, okay? These older folks back then, they knew what was going on. You got to think about it. Long before home security systems, they didn't have telephones where you could just call the police. Doctors were scarce, so you had to be pretty much a jack of all trades. You had to know a little bit of everything. That often you'll hear the term granny witches, which I will get into in a later video. But these folks were resilient. They had to know a little bit of everything. They knew how to survive. Something that is not well known today, to be honest. You know I can remember my great-grandparents who lived back in the Depression era, and while they may not have had much of an education, some of the smartest people I ever knew in my life. They knew how to survive, even though they maybe weren't able to sit down and write a research paper. They could quote scripture. They knew the Bible, the King James Version of the Bible. And if you've ever read that, you know how hard it is to read. They knew it like the back of their hands. And they knew how to fix things. They knew how to grow their own food, raise gardens. They knew how to live. So when you think about the folks were always spiritual, and they're still spiritual in these parts. So they had to be on the lookout 24/7, ways to protect their family from natural things, from bad people, from predators, animals that were out there, but also the spiritual side of things. Because you guys hear me say this often, there is a spiritual war going on around us at all times. And folks knew it back then. And you keep in mind, Appalachia 80, 100 years ago, your nearest neighbor might be a mile or more away. So there was no stone left unturned. When it came to the well-being of your family, your friends, you dotted every I, you crossed every T, and you painted your porch blue. And what makes this even more interesting, Haint Blue is actually offered in some of the most popular brand paints in existence even today, especially down through the South, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. That is very popular. It's a beautiful color. And I can remember as a little boy growing up here in Appalachia in the 1980s, early 90s, seeing a lot of these old homes that had blue porches. But I never really thought about it. And honestly, I was probably almost an adult before I knew what it was. And even to this day, my parents' home right next door to me, their front porch is blue. However, I don't think my mom had that in mind when she painted it. But after I reflected, when I first learned this, probably in my early 20s, then it all started to click and make sense. Well, I remember now, many, many years ago, seeing these old homes. A lot of the old folks who have now gone on to be with the Lord, their porches were blue. And I didn't know at the time it was to keep out haints. I've said this all my life. Appalachian folks are some of the most resilient people you will ever meet. They are the most kind, loving, beautiful people in the world. They will give you the shirt off their back if you need it. However, you don't cross them either. When they say something, they mean it. Granted, today, 2025, things are different than they was in, say, 1925. But folks here are amazing. And just because something seems silly at face value, you need to do your research before you pass judgment, because, I can't say for a fact or for certain that Haint blue paint keeps ghosts or spirits away from your home. But I do know through my 44 years of being here on this earth in Appalachia, our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and beyond, they knew what's up. So let me know in the comments, have you ever heard of a Haint or Haint blue paint? It's still very popular. Maybe your house, your porch, has Haint blue paint on it. If so, did you do it because it's pretty, or did you do it to keep things out like Haints? Please smash that like button, turn on all notifications, and subscribe. That's the best way you can support me and this channel. And also, you'll know every time I post a video just like this. And I'll be going over those Appalachian granny witches very soon. You can also follow me over on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook as The Supernatural Sleuth. Or if you have any kind of story, picture, or video you would like to share, you can send me an email at thesupernaturalsleuth@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much. I pray you had a blessed Christmas, and I pray you have a blessed New Year. I'll see you soon.